Hello, everyone. So excited to be here today. And please drop your questions either in the chat or probably the Q&A part. We'll go cover a couple topics and then we'll dive on into any Q&A that you might have. To sort of set the stage, I know we've been talking a lot about privacy during this session and conference, but as a reminder, in my mind, privacy isn't just about compliance and concern over fines. It's a human right we all deserve. And I know we just watched the video about a really amazing tool to be able to test, are you in compliance with the cookie requirements? Incredibly important to make sure you're doing that. And at the same time, privacy is more than just complying with the fines. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And I want you to really put your customer hat on during our conversation and think about your business and the decisions being made from the customer's point of view. In this era of building trust, we have more than 70% of people who are kind of reluctant to share information with businesses, or they aren't really comfortable with sharing that information. Now, for those of you who like accurate data, this is going to be a problem because if I'm not comfortable sharing data, then all the decisions and analytics that are being made are made on bad data. And that's expensive, and we're not going to get the customers and the results that we're looking for. How do we then begin to build a roadmap to customer trust? Well, we're going to talk about privacy policies and how that is the outward expression of how you're communicating with your customers about what's happening on your site. Making sure we have privacy principles. What is okay for our organization? What are we comfortable collecting, using, sharing? And then making sure we actually communicate that in our privacy policy. And variety of our laws that we have to comply to do offer rights. We have data subject access rights. And in the United States, we tend to call them individual rights, privacy rights, consumer rights. We're just not consistent over here, but pick them. And we want to make sure that customers understand how to be able to honor those rights and make it easy to do so. In fact, a lot of times I think people are concerned if I make it easy, then people are going to always opt out. And actually, they might not. They just want the option to be able to have that. And the more we hide, then the less trusting they are. Let's talk a little bit about where we are in the privacy universe to kind of set our stage for this conversation. So in Canada, we have PIPEDA. We actually have a new Canadian law that is coming on the books as well. It's not 100% passed yet, so it's not here. And then I really actually should update this slide. We also have Quebec Law 25. If you have any customers in Quebec, you're going to want to become familiar with that. But the good news is if you are already familiar and complying with GDPR, Law 25 in Quebec is very similar. So in the modern digital era, we have these two countries or regions really leading the way. And then we have in America, we have a variety of different privacy laws. We and our company call this sort of the base 5. These are the initial privacy laws. They are all in effect today and have their own specialness of requirements to pay attention to. Now, if you are not keeping up with US privacy law, let me introduce you to this beautiful map. Anything in green is passed, anything in blue is introduced, and yellow is also introduced. These are what we call the comprehensive privacy laws, but there's all kinds of other special ones. If you have children or health, there's special ones for email and text messaging and a variety of others. So this is just the comprehensive state privacy piece. And you can see we have more than half the country covered by at least an introduction to privacy laws and about 20% now covered by an actual privacy law. So we are moving fast and furious. And globally, it's expected that by the end of this year, nearly 75% of the world's population will be protected by modern privacy laws, according to Gartner. So how do we make sure that everyone here is really paying attention to privacy and incorporating it into your business and not being these companies? So we're going to quickly go through what happens when we don't make sure that privacy is at the forefront and we're thinking about the customer first. You make the headlines. So I have a number of different ones to kind of share with you. Very recently, just last week, Avast was ordered a $16.5 million fine over alleged data sales, and it was all tied to pixels. DoorDash is a really fascinating one. It's tied to marketing co-op and sharing information. If I were to sign up, they'd share it. I'd get flyers in the mail. Wasn't properly disclosed, wasn't allowed to opt out. Timu has a class action lawsuit for its data privacy practices. It also just had a data breach, I'm pretty sure, right after the Super Bowl, actually, with their big ad. Kachava is a mobile data broker, also in a lot of trouble, and had to settle and change their business practices around precise geolocation data. So anyone using geolocation data, Kochava is just one, but there's multiple other companies just like it. That affects everyone in the industry. Some other fun headlines. Sephora was the original CCPA big headline. They paid $1.2 million for secretly selling sensitive consumer data that is actually a real headline, all tied to behavioral targeting and analytics pixels. They didn't have the right disclosures and opt outs. Netflix also in violation of notices for CCPA. TikTok is getting a lot of attention on financial sites. Not listed here are pixels on healthcare sites, also getting a lot of attention. And our illegal robocalls always gain attention. Tomorrow, I'm actually at a conference talking about texting and what not to do. Then we have Christie's, where they also had some security flaws in their site. You could figure out where anyone was who had their art there. Meta, it's always in the news. You could just pick a day. OpenAI and Microsoft, and then Chick-fil-A. Chick-fil-A is just one of the examples where Video Privacy Protection Act, which is a law in the United States, is very focused on different pixels. And so if you have video and you have a pixel and you're using that for targeting, you might want to look into the Video Privacy Protection Act. So all of these are big headlines. And why did I start with the baseline of privacy laws? Well, one, because they're here to stay and we should comply with them. And so how do we make sure that our customers understand that we're complying with them? We're going to focus on that next. And at the same time, it's important to one, comply with all those laws and make sure our customers know that so you're not in the news and all these headlines. And here, I appreciate this as a global audience, but I was able to find this from the Pew Research Center that focused on the US market. And again, just kind of like another statistic to explain that consumers are concerned about how companies are collecting data. And this is incredibly important as we move to the focus of our conversation, which is that privacy can be a unique selling point. Part of that unique selling point is that we have to explain that there are privacy laws and we are complying with them. We also, all these companies are doing things and they haven't been properly disclosing or allowing people to opt out. They did something that was a little bit sneaky, and that can also get companies in trouble. And so we want to make sure that we are paying attention to that. And I see some hands raised. So I just want to make sure that those are going to be questions and everything else is good. Okay, so I will get to questions in a little bit. These are the 5 unique selling points that I wanted to focus on today. One is that each of us can ensure that our companies are really focused on trust and brand reputation. Every single headline that I just shared now has a brand challenge because their name has been spewed across headlines and everyone's reading that as opposed to all the amazing, wonderful things that that company might be doing. And trust is the very first element that a person is engaging, whether you're B2B or B2C. A person is making a decision on buying a product or a service. And you, in all the marketing activities, are helping that person decide, yes, you are going to be a wonderful place. You're using, here's how we differentiate from the competition. Well, there's also ways that we can build trust and privacy to make it be a competitive edge. Then we're going to have compliance as an asset. Actually, complying with privacy laws is cool, and it can be, and we want to shout it from the rooftops. We also want to make sure that our customers are having a good experience. And part of that is how are we incorporating the privacy obligations so that it doesn't inhibit our experience? And then what are we doing to think about privacy with all the new innovation and opportunities as our businesses keep growing and changing and new tools keep coming on the market? So, competitive differentiator, we really talked about trust with the idea that people aren't trusting where we are, and we want to be able to help build that. Well, one of the ways is something called a trust center. Think of this as a page that would house all the different policies that you might have. Maybe it's your privacy policy. Maybe it's your certifications that you have as a company in privacy or security. You're actually going to list the privacy and security features that you have for your products or services and make them really easily pronounced. This is very popular in SaaS companies, but don't get me started on why you only get some security measures if you buy the higher feature. That's a different conversation. And then in real time, explain what data is collected. So, for example, if you're going to ask me for what might be sensitive information, then explain why you need that information. Why do you need my birth date? Why do you need how much our company revenue is? Why do you need our family size? Why do you need health information? Why do you need to know my location? What is it about that data and how you're going to use it? When you explain that to people, either directly in real time and also in your trust center, you're building that element of transparency and disclosure, and that helps build trust. And remember, we have more than 70% of people who don't trust us in the first place about what we're going to do, and we have to earn their trust. So now, compliance as an asset. If we have all these different privacy laws that we have to uh, comply with, well, let's explain, how are we actually complying? This might be, we care about GDPR and here are the steps of what we've done. Here's our link to our data protection agreement. Here's how you find the privacy notice and security notices. An interesting example that I like to reference is, look at some of the big CRM and email service provider systems like a HubSpot or a Salesforce. And you'll notice that they have entire privacy centers. Really large tech companies are also a good example. You can go check out Microsoft, for example. You might be a smaller company, and they're just good, I think, inspirational models for you to be able to work towards. We have clients, they just have a very single page, a link to their data protection addendum, some bullet points about what they're doing from a security and privacy perspective, and it lists everything there. Another example is the financial company called RAMP, RAMP. They have an entire security and trust model. Some of that data is public, some of it is private once you become a paying customer and you can see more of their policies, because they know privacy and security is so important to them, and that they want to make sure that their potential customers feel good about what their practices are. They're putting it out there first. The other is, think about the customer's questions. What are the privacy and security questions your customers are going to have? And then answer them in an FAQ. This will actually help speed up your sales process and also alleviate, excuse me, any of the concerns that your customers are going to have. Might it be how you're collecting and using their data? Might it be if you have any kind of special pixel that's actually happening? Are you sharing that data? Are you compliant with XYZ law? Do they have to comply with XYZ law? What has to happen? So, again, the more you can anticipate their questions, then you can help speed up that sales cycle, the back and forth, and they're going to yet again trust you. So, your competition is likely not doing this. And I highly encourage you, go look at who your competitors are and what are they doing from a privacy and security perspective. And then think about, how do I build that trust? Well, I need to have those privacy notices, the security notices, any other practices that we might have, because the more that I disclose as a company, the more I'm going to earn their trust. Now, let's talk about having a good customer experience. I am focusing a little bit on cookies here because I am on a path to try and make this be a better experience. I should not be blocked, for example, to get to the site. I shouldn't be blocked on the mobile experience. I shouldn't have to, sometimes on mobile, a lot of times those cookie banners, you can't find the X, it takes over the whole page. It's not optimized for mobile. There's not the right language in terms of accepts and rejects and cookie settings linked to privacy notices. People have just copied what their competitor maybe is doing, but guess what? That's what they're doing and not what you're doing. Or they look to another site. So make sure that your cookie consent experience matches what you are actually doing on your site. Don't have dark patterns. Your accept and rejects should be actually the same size, the same font, the same colors. I shouldn't be misled and guided to the one that's better for the company. If you recall, I said think about the customer first. And here's a really great time to do that. And then also test it. Come with a consumer mindset. Come to your site and test it all out. And don't forget to test on mobile and on desktop, and also the different experiences. Make sure that your cookie are actually appropriately categorized and explained in your banner. And this might be a little bit different between the different jurisdictions of where you are. But this experience is a part of your brand reputation, and we want it to be a good experience for them because it's all tied to complying with privacy laws, but part of that customer experience and part of building trust with our customers or prospects. So we did a webinar on Valentine's Day. It was really fun. We had a whole cookie theme, and I just couldn't help myself but to keep the cookies going. I absolutely love chocolate chip cookies. You might see lots of cookie things in my materials because why not? We should have some fun. And that's actually a big part in your cookies. Don't forget about your brand and have some fun with it. Make sure you're using the right tone and language and branding, and it's okay. To make sure you're getting the right cookie consent experience right, review your current setup, test this regularly, perform ongoing cookie audits, and how often you do that should be dependent on how often you change your cookies or your website. I've seen cookie banners break because the website's been updated. Plugins get updated and break the cookie piece. New tags have been added and haven't been categorized, or the banner hasn't been updated properly. So make sure it's actually working because we don't want to be compliant, set it aside, think we did the right thing, and then oops, didn't actually work. Now, if you're a company who has a lot of different pixels on the site, then you should really have some standards. Make sure you have a appropriate process for putting new ones on the site, vetting them. Who are these third parties? What are they collecting? And then do make sure that you create some type of quality assurance process for revisiting this whole setup. If I add a new pixel, I have to make sure it's all actually working properly. And again, make sure that you are constantly reviewing your updates to make sure that it is all working the way it should be. So I love LLB, and this is just an example. There are also some of you doing marketing the direct marketing way with actual physical mailers. Well, your experience here to make privacy easy, you know what? If I get that catalog and I decided I don't want it anymore, I just might not want paper. So how can I easily do this? So here's an example of how I can do that. Think about the consumer experience when they're asking to honor individual rights. So what is your individual right process? And don't forget, it includes all aspects. It's not just cookies or pixels, it's also email. It could be text messaging, phone calls, the physical mailers like we just received. How will that person make the request? How does the company receive it? Who's actually going to help manage this whole thing? What will be honored? What kind of communication will you have? And then you want to make sure you're training people in the company. This is actually a part of your brand experience. A lot of times people think, oh no, this is just a compliance activity. And it is a compliance activity, but it's actually representative of how the consumer is engaging with your company and your brand. If I have a great experience, I might just opt out. If I have a terrible experience, I'm going to delete. And you want to know what? When people are coming to exercise their rights here, they typically are mad at the company, or they feel like the company is using data in a way that they don't really need to anymore and they don't like it. Otherwise, people tend not to come and make these kinds of requests. So if we are transparent, we use data in a manner that the customers aren't surprised at, we don't ask for more than they really need, then the likelihood of us getting these in the first place is going to be a lot lower. Now, another really important part about building trust and making privacy a unique selling point is through our privacy notices. Here's where you can absolutely build trust and connect. This is also where tone, simplicity, brand, style is very important. We want to make sure that we're accurate and have all the right disclosures. It's also where you are telling the consumer, hi, here's the kind of data that I'm collecting. Here's how I'm using it. Here's where I'm storing it. Here's how it's shared. Here's how you manage your individual rights. Do you have hyperlinks? Do you have a visual privacy notice? Do you make it easy for the user to be able to understand what's actually happening? I love a good visual notice. Here's a way to take all the creativity that we have and apply it to privacy. That can also be part of the trust center that we talked about at the very beginning. And in privacy, this is one of my favorite cartoons because the whole point of a privacy notice is to say what you do and then do what you say. It's very, very important to actually make sure that you know everything happening from a marketing perspective and e-commerce perspective and everything happening on your website to make sure that is all reflected in your privacy notice. And businesses are dynamic, which means when you make that update today and next month there's a really cool new campaign, you want to make sure that you go back and update it. I had a client and they had a US focused privacy notice. And then they said, actually, we're going to have this campaign. We're going to share data. We're going to work with an EU based partner. They reviewed the notice and learned it didn't apply for them, which meant we needed to make some updates for them to be able to do it going forward. And so we did. There's other companies. Maybe you're not using location data today, or maybe you're using new social media tools. Whatever that might be, you need to make sure that it's accurately reflected in your privacy notice. And again, here is a great way of how to make privacy that unique selling point. Think about what are your customers' questions, where might they object, and create a visual notice. A visual notice could be a bunch of different squares, circles, any kind of graphical picture with some summary points underneath. That can be part of that trust center, a single page with all the features. We also are seeing more summary. Hi, here's the short version of the privacy notice, and here's the fancy long version that we also have to have. Make the privacy notice have some hyperlinks to it. So it's really easy for me to just jump to the section that it is that I'm interested in instead of just reading long text. Don't forget about the font and the size of the font and making sure it's readable. Don't do PDF privacy notices either. All of that is tied to the user experience. And the user experience is one of those pieces that is all part of privacy and how we make it a unique selling point. Now, I mentioned businesses are dynamic. We are continuing to change all the time. What are a couple thoughts that you can have at how to include privacy before kicking off a new product, service, or marketing campaign? Think about what kind of data is being collected. Do you have sensitive data? And sensitive actually varies technically across laws, but then just think about could it be sensitive to the person? And if anyone here has ever answered that you don't want to answer, you'd rather not give the information, then that's because you didn't trust the company and what they were going to do with the data. Your customers feel the same way. How can we make them feel comfortable to be able to give you the data so that you have accurate data for your marketing activities? Think about, do you have to have that data? Is it required to use? We don't really want to collect the kitchen sink of data and keep it for maybe sometime in the future. That's where customers start to not trust us, and then they won't give us accurate data. Think about where that data is going to be stored. Again, customer mindset. Where's the data? What's happening with it? Don't forget our trusted privacy notice. And of course, do you have to do anything with our cookie experience? What are your privacy laws and scope, depending on where your customers and prospects are, is going to determine what laws you have to pay attention to. And anyone listening, what GDPR's requirements are not the same as the US requirements, especially under California and many other states with this concept of sale. So that's an entire other presentation, but I just want to make sure that you're mindful, not all laws are created equal. And that's a really important piece, again, kind of tied to how are you complying with privacy that your customers want to know. And let's not forget about our security measures, always important for privacy. It would not be a privacy or a conversation these days if we didn't include AI. So, what should we think about when using AI and the robots? Well, consider bias and ethical decision making. As if you're using any kind of profiling, there are different requirements coming from different privacy laws, but also very much the bias and ethical decision or ethical considerations that might happen if you're making decisions using AI and intertwining it with any kind of marketing activity to determine Jodi gets one campaign and Susie gets a different one. What kind of personal information might be collected or used in AI? I mean, there's all different kinds. Is it going to be anonymous? Is it going to be stripped? Is there not going to be any personal information in it at all? You're just using it to create cool pictures. If you're using any AI third-party vendors, who are they? They need to be treated just like every other vendor that you're working with. You need to understand, will they use the data for their own models and own purposes? How are they going to protect the data that you're giving it? So much like every other vendor that should be reviewed, you want to do the same here. Again, this element of trust is here. What kind of disclosures? Do you need to disclose anything that you might be using AI? You might have to go back to our privacy notice. And if you use any of this, you also might want to think about, remember that trust page that we were talking about, and list, here's how we use AI. Here's what our AI practices are. Here's what our AI principles are. The more transparent you are, the more the person's going to trust you. If you're using personal information in any of these campaigns and decisions, you actually will still have to honor opt outs. And how will you figure that out? And how will you manage that? And then let's not forget to include legal and privacy in these new initiatives. The earlier you include them, the easier it's going to be to incorporate whatever the obligations are up front. I want to leave you with the reminder that data privacy is everyone's responsibility. I just said make sure you include legal and privacy in any of the conversations, but it's not only their job. Everyone has a role in privacy. I always think, as an example, when you have a new idea, someone's going to ask, how much does it cost? What are the people resources? What are the IT resources? And maybe there's a legal contract involved. We always think about those pieces. We also want to start incorporating privacy to every single decision, just like we do all those other areas. So going forward, we are on this trust journey together. I firmly believe that privacy, while yes, we want to avoid fines, it really is about connecting with customers and our prospects and getting them to understand that they can trust us with their data, just like they can trust us to deliver on the product or service that they're looking to buy from us. And so privacy is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. There are more laws coming globally and in the US. They tend to focus on some similar principles. Tell the person what's actually happening, give the person the choices, collect only what you actually need for the business purpose that you need, and then protect the data. Going forward, how do you future proof what it is that you're working on? Well, know where your customers are so that you have the right law that you have to comply with. Know your data. Don't forget that privacy notice, and use the data in the way that a customer expects, and really kind of shout it from the rooftop. So, some tips for success as you march forward: make sure someone's owning privacy in your organization, but don't forget that it's not set and forget. And whoever owns privacy is not the only one responsible. The more that everyone understands their role in it and is kind of privacy responsible, much like how we say you're fiscally responsible, then the better the overall customer experience is going to be. Collect what you need, disclose why you're collecting it. Don't forget about those choices, protect, and the vendors. Don't forget about knowing who your vendors are. We often have lots of different vendors in marketing, and we want to make sure that they're going to help us comply with our privacy obligations to our customers. If you're ever not sure, ask for help. Ask a friend, ask a manager, ask privacy, ask legal, ask someone. Ask anyone. What do you think about XYZ? Wear your customer hat first. And if you think so and so, another company is doing a great job, that is amazing, but don't just copy it, because what they're doing is great for them and it might not be great for you. And truly communicate your company's privacy practices. That is how you can differentiate yourselves from the competition, how you can emphasize that compliance is an asset, how you can earn their trust and make it an amazing, enhanced customer experience. So if you liked what you heard today, I would love for us to continue the conversation. Feel free to reach out. I have a book you're happy to grab. It's also on Amazon. You can follow me on LinkedIn. Here's all the contact information. We also have a podcast called She Said Privacy, He Said Security. And we would love to hear from you. And I'm also super active on LinkedIn. So I was going to stop sharing my screen now and look to see to any questions that we might have. Oh, here's the Q&A. It helps if you go to the right place.
Thanks for that, Jodi. There's one question from Duncan Smith. I'll just read it out.
Sure.
Do you think a consumer behavior is changed by the privacy notice? And Duncan says, I'm not convinced their decisions are based on reading a privacy notice. Is there any evidence that privacy.html clicks are on the up?
Well, so that's a great question. And I have a couple thoughts. So the first is, I think the number of people who are becoming more aware of privacy notices is increasing. So I haven't necessarily seen a specific study on those clicks. I have seen studies that are showing people are reading privacy notices. Now, is everyone reading a privacy notice? No, they're not. However, many of the fines are actually coming from privacy notices that are missing disclosures. At the same time, a privacy notice is the place that privacy minded people are going to go first. And also, we don't only want to have information in the privacy notice. So, if you were to have a page and collect information right away, I am seeing more disclosures that would say right here, even if a newsletter sign up by by sharing your name here, you agree to XYZ. That's actually a real time notice right there. I've seen places where they might ask for a birth date, or they might ask for, here's why I need to know your family financial information, or why I'm interested in what uh, your favorite drinks are, whatever the activity might be, because we're going to use it for X, Y, and Z. I'm seeing many, 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 many more list privacy and security features embedded on the product and solution pages. I'm seeing people looking for just the links for privacy or any of the kind of certifications like security certifications that they might have. So I think you're right. From a privacy notice perspective, I don't think you're going to see that off the charts, but you are going to see a steady focus of people paying attention to it. And what's also really important is to include the privacy pieces in all the other places that I've just described. And my last point would be as more and more laws come to be and people are aware of them, I do think you'll start to see an increase. Thank you for asking the question.
Yeah, I would say there's two things I've noticed. Well, one is banner blindness in the sense that people just get used to closing, uh, um, and uh, and the other one would be there was a case study a long time ago where I think GameStop had a thing where in the privacy policy notice they said if you read this bit, here's an affiliate code, and there were like two, and it was like a really long privacy policy. And there were like two people that read it because I think in the policy it said if you agree to this we own your soul, and obviously the two people that complained got like a voucher code or something like that. So um, the only problem, I guess, there's a small irony in the sense that you need to have analytics approved in order to track if someone's reading that privacy notice. And I think some of the CMPs only have a kind of opt-in or opt-out. They don't really have a kind of like a view. So yeah, there's not may not necessarily be an easy way to kind of do that. I do wonder, Jodi, if the browsers are going to come up with a solution a bit like kind of Windows 8, where it's got a little slider, and maybe there'll be a solution that would set there and then determine someone's approach for compliance rather than having set it on every single website.
Well, in the US, we actually have many laws that are requiring sites to honor the universal opt out mechanism, which several of the states have determined is global privacy control. That's the first. And then California actually has a bill introduced that would require all browsers to have a universal opt out mechanism embedded in the browser. It
Hmm.
hasn't passed yet, but those are the two pieces that I've seen so far.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. Yeah. Ironically, because I think with do not track, that kind of, I think that's even got removed from Chrome. So yeah, it's but a browser-based solution would be the logical way to at least to try and standardize things, and also with minors, then they could, it'd be easier to control the like targeting or not targeting of them. Just checking in chat to see if we've got any more sort of questions. I've also, Jodi, posted your link to LinkedIn and also your podcast. So if people click on that, they can subscribe to you there.
Oh, thank
Uh,
you so much. Would love to connect with everyone.
yeah, and I have put a link to the breakout room, which is a separate Zoom room. Jodi, if you reboot your computer and then try and join that other link. Hopefully, maybe the video can restore there, and people can kind of see you sort of directly. The I have also put the feed. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
Um,
originally, I couldn't I was blocked, it was a Zoom setting, so I was just so chatty and I didn't go back to the video. Sorry, everyone. Hi, here I am.
okay, good to see you in person. And as I said, if people have tips or suggestions, or if you tell people what they liked or what could be improved on your presentation, just please fill in the speaker feedback form. And that's also where people can access your slides, which have resources and contact information in the end of that. So just looking on timings, we're just on time, which is good. Thank you again for doing that talk, Jodi. Some great material in there, and fantastic information for attendees.